Ryan Narus, welcome to Pave the Way Podcast. I've been looking forward to this interview for some time now.
Greg, I'm honored to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, just for the listeners here, the way I discovered you was I was listening to Alex Pardo's show, and he had you and Kevin Bupp, who is a guy I'm familiar with as well, about debating why mobile home parks are better than self-storage. And I've listened to the debate a few times, and I have to agree with both of you guys. I would say they are a better asset class. And I think self-storage has some real big benefits, but for some reason, I was more team mobile home parks. And I'm like, I got to get this guy Ryan on my show because he just seems like such a giver and a wealth of knowledge. And I guess my wish got granted. So I'm looking forward to getting into your story today.
Well, thanks for having me. That debate was awesome. Kevin Bupp's a friend of mine, and he was like, I got to have Ryan backing me up. So he and Alex know each other. And so Kevin reached out to me and he was like, I need someone to come in with the big guns. And I prepped and we hit him with some hard research and it was really fun. And at the end, we all agreed. Both asset classes are actually pretty awesome and are totally better than multifamily and single family homes. So, when you're competing number one versus number two, it's going to be a show.
Oh, absolutely. And it certainly was a show. And the thing I liked about the show, I encourage the listeners to go back and check that out on I think the Flip Empire podcast is what his show is called. And you were very obviously passionate about why mobile home parks are a great investment, which we'll talk about today. But the biggest thing I liked about how you and Kevin approached it was backed by data and statistics. And you weren't just being like, oh, well, they're better because I have them. Like you had hard facts, data, logic tied with emotion and your reasons for why you're in the business. And I think that really drove great points home for the listeners to make a good decision on whatever they want to do with the mobile home park business. So let's just get into your story, man. I know you're working a corporate job, and I'll let you tell the story. But really, how did you just discover mobile home parks? As you're working a successful job, following the typical script that everyone kind of gets encouraged to follow.
Yeah, listen, what I don't want to do is give everybody the highlight reel because I don't that like whatever, turn on ESPN and watch top 10 if that's what you want. I feel like your audience is more tuning in because they want to actually know how to do it. So I'll just give you the quick and dirty. I mean, I'm 34 years old as of this recording. So I'm a millennial, and like all my other millennial friends, we were told a lie growing up, which is you work really hard in school and then you'll go to a good college and then you work really hard in college and then you'll get a good job and then you work really hard at that job and you'll be able to retire comfortably one day. And that's just unequivocally false. For our grandparents, yeah, sure. It wasn't until I believe 1946 was the first year that you had the tipping point when half of the country, the 18 and older demographic, so the adult demographic, had a high school degree, right? So in other words, it wasn't until 1946 when people just finished high school. Like that was the norm. And for our grandparents, a college degree when half the country doesn't even haven't even finished high school yet, that's a big deal. And when pensions were real life and manufacturing in the middle class was a lot stronger, which it was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, it just was a different time. So it's not that our parents and our guidance counselors are being nefarious or are trying to deliberately lie to us. It's just, you mentioned the data point that I brought to that debate. I'll bring it to you here and now. The numbers, they ain't good. And what I've realized over the last year is for my entire life, I have been listening, even to this day, I have been listening to people who don't have what I want, trying to tell me directly or indirectly how to get what I want. And that's wrong. And that's wrong. Whether it's your parents who love you or your best friend in high school or college or at work or your boss or books you're reading, I mean, or TV you're watching. Like most people aren't rich. Most people don't live at home and work their dream job and make good money doing it and help others while they're doing it. Most people don't do that. So why are you listening to them? And it took me a long time to realize that. And so for me to just be like, well, Ian, my business partner, and I, we grew up in the same neighborhood and got reunited as adults while I was getting my MBA, and we're both in Florida. And he was like, what do you think about mobile home parks? And I was like, I love the show Trailer Park Boys. That sounds awesome. Like, it's a fun, like, that's how I discovered it. It's right. But like,
Yeah.
what's missing there is the literally years and years and years of cognitive dissonance that I had to battle through. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the story I thought was true and reality. What I thought I was good at and who I thought I was wrong. And I had to be open and honest with myself about what my own limitations were, physical limitations, intellectual limitations, capital limitations, like what my true aptitude was, which is brutal. And I had to find out how to stay consistent, and I had to basically find out how to get into the 1% when most people aren't 1%, and the 1%ers usually don't want to talk to you. And a lot of times, even people in the 1% who do want to talk to you don't have good advice for you. So it's really, 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 really hard, Greg, to basically be told. I kind of over exaggerate it by saying told a lie, but told a truth that's no longer true.
Mm.
Right. That, yeah, dude, go to college, rack up a bunch of student loan debt. And, like, dude, when my parents went to college, they could work like a part-time job at McDonald's and pay for their
And
entire
pay for it.
college.
Yeah. Same with mine. Yeah. It was so cheap. Now it's like, it's a
Now I
whole.
have like tens of thousands of dollars worth of student loan debt, and I'm like in a good position, dude. Some of my buddies have hundreds of thousands. So it's like, okay, like that's, ultimately what it was for me was I looked at over 100 businesses to start. I read 50 books a year. I'd forced myself to talk to anybody and everybody. And probably most importantly, because I know we want to get on to other questions, I was really brutally honest with myself. And it took a long time, and it was really unpleasant to be really open and honest with who I was and what I was really passionate about. And that was about a 3-year process, not to mention all the years of like self discovery, if you will, before that, and starting 3 businesses that went nowhere just to finally stumble into mobile home parks. And then it took years to get full time in mobile home parks. And that was with a big asterisk because I moved into a mobile home park and lived there for 14 months and then moved to another one. And so I need and I paid myself $35,000 a year before insurance and all that jazz. So like I was making nothing, sleeping on a blow up mattress. Like this is not sexy, but
Yeah.
now, it's a hockey stick growth, right? Like you plateau for a long time and then boom, and then you look up and you're like, oh my God, I did all that in 6 years. That's crazy. So
Yeah.
very long winded answer, but didn't want to give you the highlight reel.
Dude, that's unbelievable because you mentioned Trailer Park Boys. I used to watch that. I used to play hockey. So that was like the whole Canadian comedy show or whatever,
Yeah.
Bubbles, the Mr. Rob, whatever the hell that guy's name was. Anyway, but I know that Kevin said that you lived in a mobile home park. And then I listened to one of your podcasts and you were like documenting your sequence of events through living in a mobile home park and what they don't tell you about just real estate investing in general. So when it comes to mobile home parks, I mean, it is more popular now than it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that asset class really got your interest? Because you've done a lot of due diligence, you started a lot of businesses, and you really did a lot of self discovery. So what about the mobile home park niche really struck a chord in your heart?
Yeah, like I said on the interview, it was that I had an utter passion to serve people who are normally kicked and ignored. And it's really that simple. So Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm a huge fan of Gary V. And Gary V, he preaches this. He's like, the key to staying consistent is finding something that you would do for free, basically. Finding something you're so passionate about, you like, dude, you'll just do it. Right. So
Yeah.
I looked, and in my own self-discovery process, I was like, what did I do growing up? What did I do? What do I do now that I just do for free? Right. And you look at it and you're like, video games. Okay. Watching the Carolina Panthers. Like, all right, that doesn't count. But then as I'm going through stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize this. I have volunteered my time tutoring underprivileged kids for years. I'm a big proponent of education, and I'm a big proponent of, I had a learning disability growing up, and my parents gave a crap about me getting my education. And if they hadn't, I would have probably wound up in crime or, maybe living in one of my communities. And I just wouldn't have reached my full potential because my parents cared. And I
Yeah.
just realized at a young age, like, just like, I am incredibly lucky to have the parents that I did. Other people aren't. Other people who could be as entrepreneurial and successful like I have been would never be, because they don't have someone who cares. I want to be that person who cares. And so, what, I mentioned earlier, I looked at over 100 businesses and I started three. Well, the three businesses I started were more cash grabs, were
Mm,
more, oh, that sounds fun. And they weren't like, what am I already doing? Where am I already spending my time and my money? And when I look at where I donated my money and where I spent my time, it was charity stuff. And so I guess it just didn't dawn on me, because like the logical thing there is, well, then why don't you just go start a nonprofit, right?
mm.
And so I was like, but I don't want to start. I'm not a nonprofit type of guy. I'm not. That doesn't really jive with me. So then it wasn't until I just got hit in the face with mobile home parks that I was like, oh wow. So I sold cars. It's not overly similar, but it rhymes. So the two businesses have a lot of similarities. So I already have a skill set there. I was passionate about a lot of things in car sales, though it wasn't for me. So there's a lot of already things I'm passionate about, and because it is about serving people that I already serve, just because it was like, Greg, like doing the due diligence on the mobile home parks as a business to start was like, all right, let's just make sure I can actually do this. Because as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is it. This is it. This is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah, it's your calling. Exactly. And that's really, and it's like the passion oozes out of you. I can just tell how much you care, even though we've never met in person yet or whatever, but I can just tell from this interview, from the videos and stuff I've watched and you on other shows, like you really give a crap, about what you're doing. And that goes a long way. It really goes a long way. And, obviously moving into a manufactured home community or mobile home park community, it's like that requires commitment and courage, and obviously giving up something that you obviously had, to go explore something that you want to, pursue. So let's just kind of get into the mobile home park business now, and really I'm assuming that 95% of the people who are listening to this right now do not own a manufactured home community or a mobile home park community. So what did you do? Because you started from scratch. You did not have a lot of capital. You did not have a lot of experience as a real estate entrepreneur, I'm assuming. So what was your first, like, let's talk about the path to your first acquisition, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to get your first deal, right? Whether you're flipping homes or you're in the commercial business. What was your path to your first deal like? Like, let's just maybe like go high level over it, because obviously that could be a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, listen, I want to just add a follow-up thing before I address that. So I interviewed Ryan Groney on my podcast, and he very nonchalantly told his path to his first deal. And I called him out on that in the middle of the interview. I was like, I want everybody to notice how calm he is describing a colossal sacrifice he made. And the reason why I want to call that out into your audience too is because, like, when you listen to someone like me, I am not that special. I'm not. I'm not that smart. I'm not that hardworking. I'm really not. Like I say on my podcast, to get into the 1%, you have to be 1% of something. And I am not 1% of anything. I am not very good looking. I'm not athletic. I'm not that smart. I'm not that charismatic. But I'll tell you what I am 1% good at, and that's doing something different. And that to me is the easy part, because I can see what everybody else is doing and I'll just go do what no one else is doing. That to me is like a no brainer. So when I talk about my story, I might sound nonchalant like my friend Ryan Groney, but like, dude, you don't have to be great. You just have to be different. You have to do things your other people aren't willing to do. And it becomes so easy to do that when you love it. So
Yeah.
like when I say, like, I spent years and years and years introspecting, like, who am I? What am I truly passionate about? It's not, nobody really knows themselves. I don't really know myself. I have good ideas, but like, if you can find that, then it'll just make sense. And then you'll just be like, oh yeah, it's logical to move into a mobile home or do something crazy like that. But so I wanted to get that point across. But path to my first deal was long. I mean, Ian and I started in July of 2015 and didn't close our first deal until September of 2016. And again, we didn't have any
Wow.
money. We had no money. It was it was a little over 1.5 million acquisition, and it was like 60 or 65% LTV. So it was like a 500 plus $1,000 capital raise, and we had no money. So basically, we went to some folks that we had connected with and networked with and took the deal down with them. And basically, we got a finder's fee and stuck around in the LP. So, in other words, we were actually LPs on our first deal because we wanted to be flies on the wall and have a little gunpowder to go and do the next one, which we then did a couple short months later. So that was September. Our next acquisition was in January of 2017. Felt like forever in between those two, but it was tough, man. Believe it or not, it was actually a pocket listing from a broker. So folks who are like, "Whoa, I don't have mobile home parks yet, or I don't have this, that, and the other thing, and I can't get brokers to take me seriously." Here's the lesson there. You know what Ian did incredibly well? He found a way to provide value to a broker. She was a new broker in the business and was weak at the underwriting side of it. And Ian comes from finance, and he was like, "I'll make you a deal. I'll help you underwrite stuff for free, but I want first look at your deals." And she was like, "Done." And then when this one hit, Ian and I were like, "Dude, we got to do it." And so that was our first deal. That took forever. I mean, it felt like forever. We were doing mailers and cold calling and all of this stuff. Ian basically quit his job and moved into my old bedroom at my house in Charlotte, North Carolina, and lived with my parents for free. He made like $4,000 in 9 months or something like that.
Gosh,
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. And long story short, it was a tough time because I was working full time and making a full time salary, and he was working full time in the business, making no money. And I remember being like, "Dude, I feel awful because I'm maybe working maybe an hour a day, and this dude's busting it for us, and neither of us have found anything, and he's not getting paid." And I remember we had a boiling over point where, understandably, he was really angry because he's like, "Dude, I'm doing everything. You're not doing anything. And you're making money and I'm not." And I remember we got through that moment because I was like, "Yeah, dude, but do you hear the sound of my voice and the sound of yours?" I was like, "Listen to how happy you are. Do I sound happy?" And it was like, "That's a really fair point." I was like, "Dude, I would trade places with you in a second. If I could move back in with my parents, have no money, but do exactly what I want to do, I would do that. No disrespect to Wells Fargo, wonderful company, uh, great people who work there. It just, dude, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not meant to be in corporate America." And I literally gained 15 pounds of what my wife called sad weight. I was sad. So, yeah, the path to my first deal was tough, and we did not make a lot of money. We bought that for 1.525, and then it traded less than a year ago for over $4 million. And I think combined, Ian and I made about 100 grand, maybe. Uh, and then we split that 50-50. So, I mean, that kind of hurts thinking
yeah,
about,
right. It's a big
how
deal.
many,
Yeah.
yeah, we basically made this other group a ton of money. And rather than feeling bitter about it, what's the truth there? That got us in the game. That made us mobile home park owners. And sometimes the way that you get to that next level is you have to let someone else make all of the money, so to speak. Because, true story about that deal, we went to 40 banks and got 40 no's. Every single bank told us no, and we grinded it out, and we basically had to go with egg on our face back to our investors and be like, "Dude, we're going to have to pull a favor here because we can't get this done." We could not have done that deal on our own. And, would I have done X, Y, and Z differently back then? Yeah, sure. Now, knowing what I know now, I didn't have any experience. Sometimes you just got to get on the bike and start pedaling. It's like, "Oh, dude, if you could ride a bike for the first time again, would you do things differently?" Well, yeah, but like, sometimes you just got to get on the bike and start pedaling and start failing. And by the way, there were no podcasts back then. There was Jefferson Lillies and Kevin Bupps, and Jefferson Lilly is an Ivy League grad, and Kevin Bupp had like 10 years of real estate experience, and that was it. And I had no money, no network, and no experience. And, both of them were raising money. And so they're using their podcast to raise money. And there wasn't a mobile home parks in real life like my podcast, where I'm like, I'm not selling anything. I'm not raising any money. I just want to communicate to myself 6 years ago and give me the playbook for how to do it. So, in other words, like, yeah, now there's like 8 mobile home park podcasts. It's insane how much free information was out there. So yeah, if you're listening in and you're like, oh, it's going to be really tough for your first deal. Yeah,
It is.
you're going to leave a lot of money on the table, but you need to get in the game.
Totally. And it's always hard before it gets easy, right? Because you're just going to get familiar with it after, you're in the trenches. You're literally in the trenches moving into a mobile home park in the field all day long, knowing what it's like, which now gives you a great perspective on how to, grow your business. So that's incredible. And that's a big thing. I'm glad you brought that up because I see a lot of new investors, no matter where they're going into, they're like, they want to have their first deal be a home run. And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to get like, let's say it's a wholesaler, for example. Like, oh, the buyer's going to just give me 10 grand. And it's like, no, like you're getting experience. You're understanding how the mechanics of a deal work. And that it's not the money that you make on the first deal that's going to matter. It's that experience that you're going to get to then make the money in the next, 2 to 10 years is really what's going to matter. So it's very interesting how your minds were so strong during the time where you guys were in a situation where you really didn't know, what the outcomes would be, but you were obviously putting in that effort and having that faith in the process. So let's cover now, obviously fast forward, you're a very successful mobile home investor now. What does your portfolio look like from a 30,000 foot view now? Because now, are you buying only in the Southeast or do you buy nationwide? Because these mobile home parks are, they're not like there's 20 of them in each city.
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words. And yeah, I have made a name for myself by being different. So my portfolio is also different. So I only do Southeast. Most folks I know take the shotgun approach. They want to own in Minnesota and Florida and Texas. And
Yeah.
the thing is, the folks I've been able to network with come from private equity, and they all are like, I have no interest in owning 13 parks in 13 states. I want a portfolio that rhymes, right? It has a theme about it. And I think the shotgun approach might be good for volume and for impatience. But unless you're buying, like Coleman Bubis said on my podcast, he's a huge broker friend of mine. And he basically was like, that strategy works in scale. In other words, if you're in 13 parks in 13 states, but each park is 200 lots or greater, yeah, you can do it. But I'm not buying 200 lot parks. I'm buying, like, my average park size is like 40 lots. You can't have 40 lots in multiple different states. So my approach has always been, let's make it drive-in distance. Charlotte, Raleigh, Knoxville, Asheville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Southeast. And I want in the city. I don't want like Charlotte MSA, but it's all the way down in Chester. Like, Chester is not Charlotte. Ain't nobody living in Chester commuting to Charlotte. That doesn't happen. Like, people living in Chester, they barely commute to York County, which is a suburb of Charlotte. So in other words, like, that's not really Charlotte, right? That's like maybe ex-urban Charlotte. So in other words, like, I want to be in a big city. I want what no one else wants to touch: private utilities, park-owned homes, delinquency, infill. You give me stuff I can buy for pennies on the dollar. That's going to be heavy, heavy, heavy lift. I'll go do it. I literally taught myself Spanish so I could have a competitive advantage. So I am going to do what other people aren't going to do. So what has that yielded me? Well, I've bought 9 properties in Charlotte alone. I've allegedly about to have my 10th and 11th under contract here soon. If that works out, I'll be over 10 in Charlotte alone. That's going to be hundreds of lots, all within driving distance because I live here. Then I own about a little shy of 150 in Spartanburg, South Carolina, a little shy of 200 in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so basically what I've done is I've bought little heavy, heavy lift properties. I've gone in, spoke my broken Spanish, fixed them myself. I've lived there if I literally have to. And what I do from there is I kind of plant my flag in the ground and then buy up little properties around it. And then I do things like touchless pay. So people pay me through Walmart and online. So I don't have to have a check scanner. I have one property manager who can drive to all of those properties. I have rent manager text, so I can send out mass text messages for efficiency. I have rent managers e-sign documents for lease cancellation forms, rules, regulations, and lot leases. Like, I utilize technology. I use Rent Manager also to automate my own books. So I'm my own bookkeeper. And I had every single one of my property and both property management companies reconciled on January 1st of 2021. Like I've built all of this out. Why? So it's nice, smooth, easy, rhymes, all in major cities. So one day I can either do one of two things. I can either go to a giant bank like a Wells Fargo or a Key Bank and say, hey, I've got 30, 40, 50, $60 million worth of loans here. Give me non-recourse at like 3% or less. Or I can go to a big private equity shop and be like, hey, you want to buy 300 lots in Charlotte. Guess what? You can't do that because there aren't there's like a handful of major parks in the Charlotte MSA. And guess what? They're already bought by your competition. So maybe it's not on one parcel of land. Maybe you get a little discount because there's 9 parks that are all over the place. But that's 300 doors that collect well, that are run well, that have good books, that are largely automated. Give me a really low cap rate so I can do one of two things. I can either refinance and have non-recourse and tons of cash in the bank and wonderful businesses, or I can just sell and do my own thing. And I got to tell you, as a chess player, I will say this: you win in chess, or you're winning in chess, when you have the most options on the table. What you want as an entrepreneur is optionality. So that's kind of what I've created for myself. And I am like Ryan Smith, when I interviewed him for my podcast, he was like, dude, people are chasing 10 caps in the middle of nowhere. And what they don't realize is you buy something for a 10 cap, you're going to trade it at a 10 cap. You
Yeah.
buy something for a 4 cap, you're probably going to trade it for a 4 cap. But if you add $1 of NOI to a 4 cap versus a 10 cap, you're multiplying your money on the 4 cap rather than a 10 cap. So that's why I'm like, dude, I'm not chasing cash flow. I'm chasing property appreciation so I can refinance or sell.
Yeah, and you're going into those properties that they would say have hair on them because you know how to solve the hair, because you're passionate about the business, because you love the business, and because you're somewhat local to those areas,
Yep.
within 2 or 3 hours, which is very smart. You mentioned a few things I want to cover. Park owned homes. That's something that the self-storage guys were kind of giving you and Kevin a hard time about. And I have a friend who got into the space. He has like around 1,000-ish lots now, and he was talking about how he deals with park-owned homes with his partner. And you probably know the guy. We'll talk about it offline. But what's your take with park-owned homes? Because I mean, it sounds to me like when I was talking with him, we were down in Florida like a month ago, and I'm like, dude, why don't you just sell these park-owned homes back to the tenants on like a rent-to-own basis or something? So, what do you do with park-owned homes within your business? Because I know you do a lot of things differently than the majority of the crowd.
Yeah, first and foremost, I get my dealer's license because a lot of the states I do business in, you have to have a dealer's license if you're selling more than a handful of used homes per year. A lot of folks skip that step. You're leaving yourself vulnerable. Folks want to do things like sell handyman specials for $500 and peg lot rents high. And it's like, that's great, but there's a lot of problems with that. These are lessons I learned from the front lines, being my own property manager and selling homes on my own. So I've like had a chance to experiment and tinker with this. And what I've found is that park owned homes are, dude, that's where the money's at. And I'll tell you why, because if you're in a market that the lot rents $500 and you're all tenant owned homes and they're at $200, do you think the people paying $200 are going to join you on the journey to true market rent at 500? Do you think they're going to continue with you beyond that? No, they're largely not. And you don't own those homes. What does that mean? What that means is you're going to have to either buy them from them. And guess what? Now you have park owned homes, or you're going to have to hope that you catch them at a time when you can either broker a sale, or they don't sell their home out from under you to someone who's poached the mobile home and ripped it from the community, because the used market is insane right now and people can't find mobile homes. So they're looking at mobile home parks just begging to pull one out. There's a lot of issues with, and then a lot of issues with tenant owned homes in place. One of the biggest is a lot of these mom and pops did not do a good job background checking these tenants. And the thing is, the idea that makes mobile home park, one of the many things that make mobile home parks attractive to folks, is that like it's incredibly low turnover, right? An apartment complex, it turns every 18 months. Mobile home parks are dramatically um, like longer than that. But here's the thing. If these folks are not going anywhere, they're not selling, they're going to default. And because they can't join you just to market, you can't turn them as fast. Yeah, it's actually really unappealing to me. Park owned homes, by the way, are the exact opposite, because you still get that apartment effect where you still have pretty high turnover. But when they're gone, guess what? You can fix it. You can sell it at a high price. You can sell it handyman special, if you will, if you have folks you can trust that have the time, the money, and the experience. You can bring people in at whatever the actual market rent is, and you have the control. So, in other words, to me, is it a headache? Is it a huge pain in the butt? Yeah, dude, title work is no joke. It is. It is really, really hard to do title work in bulk. It is really, really hard to look at someone in the face and say, you no longer have a home. You either have to buy this or you have to leave. It's even worse when they're like, I want to buy this, and you do their background check and you're like, dude, I would never approve you. You have to leave.
Yeah.
You know, it's brutal. But guess what? For every outgoing person who is not a good fit for your community, you get to turn that community and bring in amazing new people who are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have affordable housing in a major city, who know that because you're at a higher lot rent, you are now the highest and best use for that parcel of land. So, for example, it just came out in the news. Wellington in Wake Forest, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh, is getting redeveloped, and there's like 260 families there that now have nowhere to go. Do you know why that is? It's because the dude's lot rent wasn't high enough, and it wasn't at market. And then one day, someone looked at it and was like, I'm realistically not going to get them from 200 to 500 or whatever it is, so let's just redevelop it into luxury apartments. That's going to happen again and again and again if you don't get rents to the true market. And the thing is, when they're all tenant owned homes, it is incredibly difficult to get those folks up to true market without having to evict them. And no matter, like Coleman Bubis said on my podcast, if you own a mobile home park, you're in the mobile home business. You're in the park owned home business, whether you're all tenant owned homes or not. It's going to happen. So rather than like fight the gale force winds, I'm going right with it. It's like Captain Jack Sparrow, man, like wherever the wind may take us, and to me, what is difficult is valuable. And to me, I love park owned homes. Send them all my way, man.
No, yeah, exactly. And you're able to make an opportunity out of something that people usually get fatigued about. Oh my God,
Yep.
park home. It's like, yeah, but the logic you use to, communicate what your thoughts are on them makes so much sense, because most people will just hear something and they'll be like, oh, that's got to be true. But you're like, no, how do I turn a park owned home into an actual asset versus, and it's true though, because like if you don't own the mobile home, they are in control of it. Like you're the one if they're conditioning, I have tenants right now, and they're just to make a sort of not analogy, but a comparison. Like I bought this property sight unseen. It's a townhouse up in New York. And they have been so used to paying $950 market rent. Market rent's almost $2,000.
Oh,
so I'm evicting them right now.
Yeah.
And they are in total control. I am powerless, right? Yeah. But if it was like a scenario where like it's interesting how, like, because they're in full control of that asset, but it makes a lot of sense, and it goes to show like what the landlord, the previous landlord, was really doing them a disservice by not raising their rent reasonably over time. Because now I'm the one, I got a good deal on it, but like now I'm the one who's getting them to the truth, and they don't like the truth. They don't like that they're going to have to go, so if that landlord just raised their rent over time reasonably, I probably wouldn't own the property, because she wouldn't have sold it to me for a song. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So that makes a lot of sense. Final question on the technicalities of the mobile home park, because I definitely want to respect your time, is you mentioned something, and I've heard Kevin Bupp talk about this before. This is more of like a in the trenches kind of thing. You like properties that have like septic tanks and lagoons, like, because a lot of people, that scares them away with mobile home parks, because there's so many parks, or there's so many units that are dependent upon those systems. If those systems fail, there could be trouble, because there's a lot, they're bigger systems because they have to serve the entire community. So what are some things that you do to kind of mitigate your risk when it comes to buying a park that has private utilities?
Yeah, listen, great question. And the answer is you become a student of the game. You learn as much as humanly possible about said asset class and
Yeah.
what goes into it. You need to know things like, what is a distribution box? What does it mean to have the soil perk? What does it mean to have a gravel pit? Like, you need to know what these things are so that when you're looking at an opportunity, you either know, yeah, that's legit, or that's an accident waiting to happen. So, like, I see big name, big deal person after another. I've raised 20 million bucks come into this space over and over and over again over the years. They're really loud, they're really proud, and then they go really quiet out of nowhere and you never hear from them again. And I'll tell you why. It's because, I mean, I was sitting down with one folks, I'm not going to mention who they are, but they're way more popular than I will ever be. Everybody knows them, you know them. And I was sitting down having dinner with them, and I was like, talk to me about your due diligence. And they're like, oh yeah, we hired a septic guy to go look at X, Y, and Z. And I was asking them overly basic questions about septics, and they looked at me like I had 5 heads. I'm like, great, you just raised $100 million. You don't know what a distribution box is. Good luck with that. Let's just say they call me every now and again with overly basic questions. And I'm like, what, dude, like, what are you doing here, man? And it's, that's why I told Andrew Keel when he came out with his podcast, Passive Investing in Mobile Home Parks, I was like, dude, this podcast is very necessary because there are a lot of folks who have not a clue what they're doing, raising big time money, and just they're cruising for a bruising. But unfortunately, they're all probably going to do just fine because I think mobile home parks are still undervalued. I think they're being sold for below market what they really should be going for right now. I actually think this space is undervalued. So in other words, how do you, for the average Joe like me, because
Yeah.
I have no interest in raising $100 million. Like, I don't. I have no interest in even raising $10 million. I like what I've got going on. We've bought 20 properties. We'll do another wave here pretty soon, all with my own money and my close friends' money. I don't want to raise retail capital. I don't. And I don't want someone to do that for me. I just don't want to do that. I want to be my own scientist and the captain of my own ship, if you will. So why do I run headfirst at septic, stuff like
Yeah,
that?
because I have properties like that too that I own, like a mixed use commercial, and that's scary to me. And I'm actually selling it right now because there's just so
Dude,
much drama with it.
there's I've bought a property that was city water, city sewer, and I had more problems with that property than any well septic I have ever owned. It
Yeah,
is both ways.
yeah,
The infrastructure is the silent killer of mobile home parks, especially if your lot rents are low, because you're just going to get devastated when something breaks. So septic tanks, as long as you have good soil, you have lots of space for your leach lines. Depending on your state, if gravel pits are legal or not, gravel pits are actually reasonable solutions for various reasons. They also cause problems for other reasons, but septic tanks to me are not overly scary. They're not, as long as you have the soil to be able to rock and roll. Dude, it's not a big deal. Wells to me are a lot scarier because
Mm,
it's
yeah,
40,000 plus to drill another one, and you are dealing with people's livelihood. That is on you. If you
water.
hired the wrong company to handle the chemicals, it's a big deal. It's really scary to me. That being said, guess what? What people don't want to do and don't understand is just opportunity for you. And what I'm seeing in this space, Greg, is that, you know, people don't want well and septic and park owned homes now. 6 years ago when I started, even less, and now people raise $100 million and they can't find city water, city sewer, all tenant owned homes, at least not in major MSAs, for reasonable prices. So what are they doing? They're starting to go, well, I guess I can't have that thesis, so let's pivot a little bit. Let's, still go all tenant owned homes, but let's go well. And then, okay, well, maybe we'll go smaller, and then maybe we'll do this, and maybe and then all of a sudden they go, oh my God, I've raised all this money, I have nowhere to place it. And then they get desperate. I have an episode on my podcast called How Smart People Outsmart Themselves, where I go into detail about how that was years ago when I made that episode. It's worse now. So yeah, don't be afraid. Do your due diligence. There are a lot of great books out there and YouTube videos that'll walk you through the basics. You don't need to be an expert. That's why you hire an expert. Like you don't need to be a black belt to do due diligence and to take a risk, but you also don't want to be a white belt. You want to be, yellow belt, blue belt, green belt, whatever discipline of martial arts you took. You want to be a step above a beginner so you can speak the language, but you don't necessarily need to, know all these crazy facts about this esoteric random thing. Like let the
Yeah.
professionals do that for you, but don't, you need to be able to blow away smoke screen by someone who actually has no idea what they're talking about and are looking for a
Totally.
quick
You got
buck.
to know enough to be dangerous, as they say.
Yes.
That's right. That's awesome, man. Well, listen, I could talk to you for hours about these mobile
Yeah.
homes. It's very fascinating. And, we've covered a lot of great ground today, your journey, how you made your first acquisition. The biggest thing I'm taking away from this, and I'm sure the listeners are taking away from this, is that really how passionate you are and how you've combined that passion with, your knowledge and your commitment to just improving your craft and being a master of your craft to explode your mobile home park business. And I really like too how you know what you want and why you want it. And you don't just go out, and I can just tell this just from hanging around you on this, those last 40 minutes. You don't need to be the big dog in town raising $10 million because everyone else is doing it. You know why you're in this business, and you know what success looks like to you, and that allows you to make good decisions to grow your business and ultimately grow your life. So I really appreciate you being transparent on here, telling us really how it goes down. And this has been a great conversation. So if people wanted to learn more about you and connect with you, I know you're just a huge giver. You're very generous. What's the best way for them to connect with you? So I guess maybe like one social media profile. My assistant will put all this in the show notes, so cool. She'll put all this in there. And then also the podcast. People want to learn about your media you put out there.
Listen, like my favorite rapper Tupac used to say, I ain't hard to find. Only Ryan Narus that I am aware of in the world. If you Google me, my LinkedIn, my website are like the first things that pop up. I am a very open person. I don't care if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or flat broke and unemployed. Like, I will talk to you. I will help you. I mean that. I thoroughly enjoy helping others. I want the world to be a better place because I was here. My podcast is Mobile Home Parks in Real Life. I pump out stuff on LinkedIn almost daily. Like, I am a wealth of just free knowledge and I don't need anything in return. Why? Because I know what I'm passionate about, and that's helping others and that's making this space better. And I know that 6 years ago, I would have killed for some of the information I'm pumping out now. So I'm doing it not just for you, but for Ryan of 6 years ago. And I want to say this before we part ways today, Greg, for your audience. If you're listening in, you are too. You hear me and my passion? Guess what? I'm not really that abnormal. You are too. You are passionate about something. There's something in this world that would be a no-brainer sacrifice to you. There's some, as Mark Manson says in his best-selling book, like there is a pile of crap because every lot in life comes with a pile of crap. There is a pile of crap that you would be willing to deal with and wake up excited about every morning to deal with. You just have to find that. And then when you find that, guess what? You don't have to work that hard. I work maybe 50 hours a week when I want to, how I want to. I make decent money and I get to help others. Like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, guess what? Like, I'm not that smart. I'm not that hardworking. Have I made major sacrifices? Yes. But guess what? I talk about them nonchalantly now. Why? Because it was an easy decision. Why? Because I found what I loved. When I say, like, go spend time figuring out your why and who you are, it's because the key to staying consistent is defining what you're passionate about, because then it's like you're just not going to quit because you're like, what else am I going to do? I love this, right?
I love that. That's so true.
Walk away with anything, folks, like just walk away with, like, spend years, like me, I spent years figuring out who I was and what I'm passionate about, and stop listening to other people. Go find it for yourself. Stop chasing a dollar in what's sexy. Go, what is the dorky thing that you just did and you didn't, you kind of didn't want other people to know you were doing, like whatever that is, like go and figure it out, and you'll wake up every day excited to get to work. I mean, that's it. You can do it too. I'm not that special.
I love it, bro. Well said, man. Well freaking said. I really know a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this. They're going to share this show. They're going to listen to it more than once. They're going to maybe write up a report and send it to us or something with their takeaways. And we'll make sure that we have all of the information you shared in the show notes here. This will get promoted online, and I know will help a lot of people. So I really appreciate you being generous with your time today. And you're a wealth of knowledge. You're an awesome guy to talk to. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for being a guest on Pave the Way Podcast.
Honored to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.